Thank you, Kundan, and thank you everyone for coming. We met already before, so it would be easy for me. I can see Bahman is here, an old friend, very nice, and even hi Bahman, and someone else was here. Brandt is here also, so lovely. So today, since we are all aware of the Rig Veda, it's not something we are kind of looking at for the first time. I would start with the most essential discovery which I made, which made all the interest in the Rig Veda and Sri Aurobindo studies in my life. And I will not overload you with material which is well known and published, shift of paradigms, different godheads, how they function, what it is about, universal consciousness, transcendental. I would not do that much. But I want to start today with psychological discovery. So the knowledge by knowing which everything can be known or discovered. And that is the Vedic contribution. And that was picked up by Sri Aurobindo and the Mother and developed into the integral vision, integral yoga. So I think this is the most valuable thing for me, so I would like to share this with you today. If I can project, I can project. Here it is. You can see it, yes, on the screen, most probably yes. So I want to speak of the Veda in the light of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, and with their quotations and references from Savitri and Integral Yoga. It's a bit different, less scientific, more psychological discovery, a more even spiritualistic approach to the Veda. So I will take a myth from Shatapatha Brahmana, from the very beginning, how it happened, according to the vision of the Veda. At the beginning was the self. Atman was at the beginning. He was alone. There was nobody else, only Atman, one self. He looked around and didn't find anybody except himself. Wherever he looked for someone, there was nobody, only him, everywhere alone. He said, I am, but there was no other name to say, for he was alone. There was no name to say. He couldn't even name himself because he was alone. Interesting. I skip many kind of lines from this myth and jump to the end, but he was not happy. He wanted another. Sadvitiyam aichat. Sanai vareme. He was not happy. Sadvitiyam aichat. He wanted the second. So he was looking for someone and didn't find anyone, and then he wanted the second. This is the fundamental vision. This is in Sanskrit written, the same story. Now I will jump into Taittiriya, which is also a very puzzling text. I will translate line by line. So kamayata, and he desired, bahusyam, may I be many. Satapo tapyata, and he flamed in tapas. Satapas taptva, and having flamed in tapas, idam sarvam asrijata. He cast all this out of himself. Yat idam kimcha, whatever exists. Whatever exists was cast out of himself. Interestingly, that since he was alone and was everywhere only him, how come that he could cast something out? Where is out? There is no out. There is him there. And this would be for us a very important point. We will come to it later. There is also another very important idea is bahusyam, may I be many. This is the very the very raison d'être of all this creation. He wanted to be many. The Supreme, who was alone, was not happy to be alone. He wanted to be many. So, tat srashtva, having cast all that out of himself, tat evanu pravishat, he entered it. Tad anupravishya, having entered that, satya tyacha bhavat, it became that and this, niruktam cha, expressed and unexpressed, nilayanam cha, located and unlocated, vijnanam cha, discerned and undiscerned, satyam cha nritam cha satyam abhavat, satyam, the truth, became true and untrue. Yadidam kimcha, whatever exists. This is something important for us. Here there is indication of two major stages of creation. First he recognizes himself as alone, then he casts out of himself all whatever exists, and then he enters it. This is so puzzling, and there is no answer to it, and the answer was found in Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Nobody else ever answered this. How could he cast out of himself and enter it? I jump straight to Sri Aurobindo. Why should Brahman, says Sri Aurobindo, who is perfect, absolute, infinite, needing nothing, alone, yes, desiring nothing at all, throw out force of consciousness to create in itself these worlds of forms? If then, being free to move or remain eternally still, to throw itself into forms or retain the potentiality of form in itself, it indulges its power of movement and formation, it can be only for one reason, for delight. So all this was done for delight. Interestingly, Mother says he actually wanted to have additional ananda. He had his delight, his ananda of identity, but he wanted to have ananda of unity through second one, through another, to create another and to have additional ananda of unity, recognizing oneself in another. Mother says, the Supreme decided to exteriorize himself, that is, cast out, objectivize himself, in order to have the joy of knowing himself in detail, to be able to see himself. The one who alone was could not see himself, because he didn't have even a name to say. There was nothing objective, he was subjectively existing. So the first thing in himself which he exteriorized was the knowledge of the world and the power to create it. This knowledge, consciousness and force began its work, and in the Supreme Will there was a plan, and the first principle of this plan was the expression of both the essential joy and the essential freedom, which seemed to be the most interesting feature of this creation. And it's quite amazing. Essential joy and essential freedom. These are our rights as the souls here in this manifestation, for essential joy experience and freedom of expression. So how could he exteriorize himself? How he could cast out of himself? He had to have that out of himself. How would we do it as him? If we alone are, suppose I am alone, omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, everything is in my power, in my knowledge, I am alone, I am what I am, as it is said in the Bible, and then I want to have another, or to be many. How could I do that? It's a question. It's a big question which was answered only in the Veda. And this is where we're coming to the first creation, or to the first stage of creation. Night, says the Veda, was born out of this shining truth of the supreme power. From the night the waters of the inconscient came into being, and from the waters of the inconscient the time was born, the creator of all that moves. So the divine said, not like in the Bible, let it be light, but he said, let it be night, because he was light. So he created a gap, a night, something where he is not. That place where he would cast all whatever exists, yes? It has to be not, first of all. So out of himself he cast a luminous shadow, all these worlds, from the superconscient to the inconscient, gradually denying himself, withdrawing his supreme knowledge from his supreme power, those knowledge power at the beginning. He withdraws his awareness from his power, becoming unaware of these worlds of himself as himself. That is the night. Sri Aurobindo writes beautifully in Savitri about this. In the enigma of the darkened vasts, in the passion of self-loss of the infinite, a contradiction founds the base of life. The eternal, the divine reality has faced itself with its own contraries. Being became the void, and conscious force nescience, and walk of a blind energy, and ecstasy took the figure of world pain. So being became non-being, conscious force became nescience and blind energy. The ecstasy turned into the world pain. These are our Sat, Chit, Ananda, and Vijnana. About these four emanations Mother speaks, and this is the basis of Savitri. The whole Savitri is about these four emanations and their recovery. So, the first four emanations, according to the Mother's story, were consciousness in light, basically consciousness, which is light, self-awareness of Him, bliss, which is emanation of that self-awareness of the being, truth, which will become the foundation of the creation, and life, which is Sat, actually eternal life of his being. So once these four emanations were created, they fell into the opposite of themselves, because they considered themselves, as Mother says, supreme. And so they started to manifest themselves, and so gradually they disconnected from one another and turned gradually into their opposites. So consciousness in light fell into the darkness. At the bottom here is the darkness. Bliss afterwards was dragged gradually into suffering, because where there is no awareness, the bliss itself is turned into suffering, pain. Truth gradually fell into the falsehood, and life itself, eternal life, immortal life, turned into death. So for the first time he could experience death, total denial of himself, in his being, in his consciousness, in his bliss, and his truth. So once this happened, when the first involution took place, says the Veda, and the light was turned into the darkness, and that darkness, as we understand, is nothing but light, which is not aware of the Supreme, yes? And that suffering is nothing but bliss, which is not aware of the Supreme origin. And the truth and the falsehood is the truth, which is distorted by forgetting what it is. And finally, death is nothing but eternal life, which deviated from the Supreme. So these turned, so the light was turned into darkness, and creation became as if unsteady. Shithilam iva, adhruvam iva, shithilam iva, says the Veda. It could not sustain itself. It could not be, because it wasn't. It wasn't in awareness, it wasn't in the bliss, it wasn't in the truth, it wasn't even in the being. So, the Supreme Self had to enter it and to support it from within, for it to be. When he entered, as the Veda says, himself by himself, atmanatmanam abhisam vivesha, the creation became steady. So it wasn't shaky anymore, it wasn't disappearing or falling into oblivion. It became stabilized, as it were. The night was stabilized. There is a beautiful passage in Savitri which confirms this. When all was plunged in the negating void, non-being's night could never have been saved if being had not plunged into the dark. So that being which plunged into the dark now sustains and saves the night. Non-being's night becomes a location for all the stars, yes, for all the souls. It becomes a place for our development of the multitude creation. Bahusyam, may I be many. In the mother's story, in order to repair the fall of the first emanations, the Supreme Mother, Aditi, delegated out of herself the force of love, which has plunged into the darkness of the first creation. In the Vedas it is Agni, the divine will, the first avatar, who lay down and hid himself within the darkness, the immortal among mortals. It is because of his presence that everyone and everything is evolving, seeking after the higher knowledge of the Supreme. So within this darkness there are sparks, there are souls which are growing through the darkness towards light. This is the picture by Huta from the sketch of the mother, that avatar which is laying down at the bottom of the darkness of the inconscient. And this is the secret of the Veda, that in the depth of our darkness there is a divine which is pushing the whole evolution forward. So Sri Aurobindo looks at evolution in this way. One sentence explains everything. A soul of the divine is here slowly awaking out of its involution and concealment in the material inconscience. Beautiful passage from Savitri. He sleeps in the atom and the burning star. He sleeps in man and God and beast and stone. Because he is there, the inconscient does its work. Because he is there, the world forgets to die. The world forgets to die because the world is not. But because he's there, the world is still going on and evolving and developing and cannot leave without a trace. And because of this, these two creations, the first emanations which fell into the opposite and were precipitated with the force, which is our psychic force of love evolving from within and enlightening the fallen emanations, redeeming them, bringing them back to their self-awareness, the whole process of evolution starts. And Sri Aurobindo speaks about this evolution, terrestrial evolutionary working of nature has a double process, and it's quite interesting. there is an outward visible process of physical evolution, with birth as its machinery, for each evolved form of body housing its own evolved power of consciousness is maintained and kept in continuity by heredity. So by genome, we are passing all the changes we experience to our children, and they pass to our grandchildren and so on. So in this way, the adjustment of the betterment of evolution, of evolutionary working in the body is taking place. There is at the same time an invisible process of soul evolution with rebirth into ascending grades of form and consciousness as its machinery. So at the same time, the soul is coming, taking this body, building it up, and evolving through this body, helping these instruments to evolve, learning from them how to be in time and space, and every time, and leaves the body. So I leave my children and grandchildren, they go ahead, forward, and after many generations I come back to the body of my grandchildren, suppose, or somebody's grandchildren, take it up again and push it forward again. So in this way, the whole evolution of humanity is taking place, and everybody is a part of it, as it were. There is a philosophical also passage which I also want to quote here. It's quite interesting. Brahman, says Sri Aurobindo, has projected in itself this luminous shadow of itself, and has in the act begun to envisage itself and consider its essentialities in the light of attributes. He who is existence, consciousness, bliss, envisages himself as existent, conscious, blissful. From that moment, phenomenal manifestation becomes inevitable. The unqualified chooses to regard himself as qualified. The one becomes the many. So the existence and existent, consciousness and conscient, or conscious, blissful, bliss and blissful. This change is taking place. So Brahman is basically the spirit. Sat Chit Ananda Vijnana Manas Prana. These are the levels, yes, of consciousness and being, existence, consciousness, bliss, supermind, mind, life, and matter in the gradation. These are well-known gradations. And within them, as it were, if they are horizontal, we can imagine, the vertical line, the knot on each of this level is Atman, self, the Purusha, Sat Purusha, the divine self, all conscious soul, all blissful soul, great soul, mental being, vital being, physical being, self, Atman, Purusha, person. So, and that is the way how the Indian philosophy explains the creation of the self, of the bodies, of multitude creation. Now I'm coming totally to the psychological part of the integral yoga, which is important to connect to this vision of double creation. So, the true being, says Sri Aurobindo, may be realized in one or both of two aspects, the self, or Atman, and the soul, or Antaratman, psychic being, Chaitya Purusha. The difference is that one is felt as universal, the other is individual, supporting mind, life, and body. So the self, Jivatma, is above the head, the witness Purusha, is felt as universal. And the psychic being within the heart is felt as individual, supporting mind, life, and body. When one first realizes the Atman, that's what we call mukti, one feels it separate from all things, existing in itself and detached. When one realizes the psychic being, it is not like that. For this brings the sense of union with the divine and dependence upon it, and soul consecration to the divine alone, and the power to change the nature and discover the true mental, the true vital, and the true physical being in oneself, which means the manifestation of the divine in the physical, vital, and mental. Both realizations are necessary for this yoga. So there is, the mukti is necessary, yes, and the realization of the psychic is necessary. Both are part of integral yoga. So there is one more creation which is coming. So what we have, it's quite interesting. We have in us the spark of the divine, which is totally aware of itself, the psychic being, yes? And we have also the body, physical body, vital body, mental body, which are less and less aware of who we are. And in the physical, we're hardly aware that it is what we are. And in the surrounding consciousness, we are even less aware. I am not even aware what is in the next room or in the next country. I'm not aware at all of anything other than few thoughts of mine and few feelings which are passing by through my consciousness here. So my awareness is very restricted. But from the innermost to the outermost, there are grades of awareness. And these are the two creations. The first is the fallen emanations, which we inherited as our bodies. And the spark within me, the soul within me, is that one who descended to redeem the fallen emanations, took onto itself the whole creation and started to build up the bodies, aware, creating the instruments aware of the spirit and their spiritual origin. So there are first creation was the fall of the spirit, which laid out the field of its future manifestation. All the levels of consciousness were unfolded gradually. This is in involution, creating all the worlds in the involutionary order, from light to darkness, from superconscient to inconscient, from spirit to matter. The second creation was a plunge of the Supreme into the darkness of material inconscience, bringing the aspect of the self into existence in terms of individual growth and realization. From this point, matter becomes animated and the evolution takes place. It goes on till psychic being is fully individualized and formed, and the instruments of the expression, of its expression, body, life, and mind, are fully developed and to embody the spirit. Now, between these two, the soul, our soul, and the nature, there is a contradiction, ongoing contradiction, which will be resolved, as Sri Aurobindo suggests, by the supramental manifestation. And the third creation would be the supramental descent or manifestation, which will reconcile nature with the soul, enthrones the psychic being as the Lord of creation, and gives it direct access to the higher realms of being and consciousness, establishing the law of the spirit in the whole nature. This is the partially Vedic, partially Sri Aurobindo, and now I want to show you the three transformations, and I will stop there for questions and discussions which are very important. Sri Aurobindo speaks about three statuses of the divine: individual, universal, and transcendental. There are also three different statuses of transformation. First is the psychic transformation, in which all is in contact with the divine through the individual psychic consciousness, through our soul. Next is the spiritual transformation, in which all is merged in the divine, in the cosmic consciousness. Third is the supramental transformation, in which all becomes supramentalized in the divine Gnostic consciousness. I will give three quotations for these three transformations and stop at that. These are words of Sri Aurobindo. The psychic being is a flame born out of the divine, and luminous inhabitant of the ignorance grows in it till it is able to turn it towards the knowledge. It is a deputy of the unborn self, or Atman, in the forms of nature, the individual soul, supporting mind, life and body, standing behind them, watching and profiting by their development and experience. Interesting, yes? He is watching and profiting by their development. Not only they profit from for him being there, but also that he is profiting from their development and experience. If it can come forward into the front and govern overtly and entirely this outer nature of mind, life and body, then these can be cast into soul images of what is true, right and beautiful. And in the end, the whole nature can be turned towards the real aim of life, the supreme victory, the ascent into spiritual existence. So according to Sri Aurobindo, you know that the psychic transformations, psychic reaching to the surface is the major event in integral yoga, which is kind of starting the whole transformation of our nature. The spiritual transformation. Notice how he starts. The psychic being, again psychic being, which is now in front, can, by the spiritual influx, enlarge itself and embrace the whole world in an intimate communion and oneness. It can enlarge itself and embrace the whole universe. Or it may become aware of its eternal companion with capital C, and elect to live forever in his presence, universal divine, yeah? Krishna, in an imperishable union and oneness as the eternal lover with the eternal beloved, which of all spiritual experiences is the most intense in beauty and rapture, of that bhakti movement. Yeah? All these are great, splendid achievements of our spiritual self-finding, but they are not necessarily the last end and entire consummation. More is possible. It's typical for Sri Aurobindo. Even more is possible, more than this, yes. Supramental manifestation is more. The psychic transformation, after rising into spiritual change, has then to be completed, integralized, exceeded, and uplifted by a supramental transformation. In supermind is the integrating light, the consummating force, the wide entry into the supreme Ananda, into the transcendental. The psychic being, uplifted by that light and force, can unite itself with the original delight of existence from which it came. It came from Ananda, and it can unite itself with Ananda in this time and space, overcoming the dualities of pain and pleasure, delivering from all fear and shrinking the mind, life and body. It can recast the contacts of existence in the world into terms of the divine Ananda. All right, I will stop here, and because it's kind of intense, and open to your remarks, questions, and insights.